Welcome to this ongoing soundtrack series where I analyze the musical score of some of the greatest movies, TV shows, and video games. It is here where I discuss how a soundtrack complements its corresponding title, along with how it came to be. In this episode, I'll be going over the score of one of the greatest video games of all time, and a personal favorite, Metal Gear Solid. The game was composed by a sound team constituted by an assortment of composers, which was organized by the Konami Computer Entertainment Corporation. One of the lead composers of the team was Kazuki Muraoka, who arranged the music for the original NES Metal Gear game, and continued to be the music director for future Metal Gear titles. The rest of the team comprises of Takanori Ishiyama, Jiji Mirani, Lee Jong Myung, and Hiroyuki Togo. The Metal Gear Solid main theme created by composer TAPPY, also known as TAPPY Iwaz, and vocal track The Best Is Yet to Come, written and produced by Rika Muranaka, are the exception to this team's contribution. Within the episode, I'll go over the ambient sound, Kojima's combination of cinematic and game music, and the score's unique musical setup. Before we start, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to find more soundtrack analysis on other titles in the future. I release a new analysis video every week. With all that said, let's begin. Metal Gear Solid was a critically acclaimed release that published for PlayStation back in 1998, and its strengths are recognizable summits that are now influential. A powerful motor of this game's success is its vivid score. To this day, the music of Metal Gear is recalled in discussions as one of the most notable game soundtracks in history. The main theme of the game is the centerpiece of Metal Gear Solid, due to its addictive melody and remarkable music dynamics. The track is recycled throughout the series, excluding the final game, The Phantom Pain. Each game in the Metal Gear series has a defined soundtrack that encompasses the game's general attitude. The output of Metal Gear Solid's soundtrack is unorthodox, as the leitmotifs or musical themes are strangely universal. Unlike most scores where the leitmotifs are designated towards an individual character or situation, the entire score is predominantly based on the game's dark and remote setting, Shadow Moses Island. Although there is an exception to certain boss tracks, such as Duel, Hind D, and Psycho Mantis' theme, Mantis Hymn. But these tracks still originate to the central theme of the game's setting, and carry similar instruments. The game takes place on a weapon development complex disguised as a nuclear weapons disposal facility, which take place during the Shadow Moses incident, an uprising against the US. The many tones that come from the score replicate the events of the game and environmental resonance. Tracks like Cavern, Warhead Storage, and Rex's Lair symbolize that corresponding location's ambient mood. There's a reverberation in these area tracks that influence the island's isolation, as well as its obscure and metallic quality. The facility runs deep into the island, which shows within the music's amplitude and frequency. Further in Shadow Moses' facility, the location tracks maintain a deep pitch to imply the corporation's confidential and demented plans. Even Mantis' theme, a track played later in the game and deeper in the bass, carries a psychological sound that revolves around horror and solitude. Creator and director Hideo Kojima has been known to masquerade his titles as melodramatic movies in the style of a cinematic video game. There is a singularity of his work that allows his viewers to know when they are playing a Kojima Productions game. In turn, those viewers become devoted fans to his unnatural approach of interactivity within a video game. The score of Metal Gear Solid matches the fundamentals of a motion picture, as well as the sound of a game developed in that generation. The game blends a film's orchestral nature with computerized tunes found within a 90s video game. During the Kojima-style cutscenes, the compositions are scripted musical arrangements, much like one scene in a film, that utilizes a large portion of the orchestra's instruments and choir. In-game music, on the other hand, handles a subtle approach with fewer instruments in a looping pattern. Although there are moments in-game, specifically moments of discovery and boss battles, where the music introduces vigorous instruments with a new looping pattern. What makes this musical technique profitable is the ability to easily shift between the undiscovered, evasive, and alert phases without interrupting an elaborate portion of a song. Metal Gear Solid infuses modern classical with electronic and ambient genres to manage the game's true exterior. The composers worked on a series of electronic hardware to produce Metal Gear's unique music. Since there is no record what specific instruments were used, based on the game's musical output and comparing it with hardware used at that time, the key players are Roland synthetic workstations, particularly the Roland JV2080 sample engine hardware. This machine is a sound module used to mix preset audio fragments and arrange a piece inputted by the composer. In simpler terms, all the music was composed using a combination of audio hardware, the Roland JV2080, and synthetic instruments, music pads, and keyboards to command that hardware. Although the JV2080 might not be the only contributor for the sound samples, it created a majority of the tones. Japanese composers were notorious for creating PlayStation 1 scores with Roland JV synths, especially the JV2080, a superior piece of hardware during that time era. Soundtracks created with these type of audio modules include Final Fantasy VII, Resident Evil 2, and many other 90s titles. For Metal Gear Solid, not all the outputted music were actually preset tones. A great amount were programmed and processed through external hardware. The Roland Sound module used an orchestral expansion card to generate orchestra instruments. The metallic and manipulated sounds of the score were custom made from the additional effects within the expansion board. The imitated instruments within the score include strings, a piano, choir, drums, and anvils. The drum sounds were produced with reverb, which was later equalized and thoroughly compressed to sound larger than it really is. Now, you might wonder what an anvil is doing in an orchestra. The truth is, anvils are a popular key role in opera compositions. Opera orchestra composer Giuseppe Verdi has notably used this chunk of metal as an instrument in his opera titled I Trovatore. Although Metal Gear Solid isn't an opera, but uses the anvil to resonate the dark portion of the game by creating a metallic acoustic sound. The sound is created with two separately tuned anvils underneath another set of anvils that are raised an octave above the prior two. So we have a manipulated sound of around 4 anvils merged into one. The audio of a PlayStation game has a restriction of 512 kilobytes of dedicated memory, which allows a communication with a MIDI, or musical instrument digital interface. The composers of many games like Metal Gear Solid use the best of their available console's resources. Before I give my final thoughts on Metal Gear Solid's score, don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with the Score UnCovered series. Based on your interest for Metal Gear, stay tuned for all the other Metal Gear scores to be analyzed in the future. If you want to request a movie, TV show, or video game for Score UnCovered, let me know here on YouTube or my Twitter page. Game soundtracks from the two-dimensional NES to the early three-dimensional PlayStation console transmit what we think of now as classical video game music. They carry electronic orchestral samples that were, at the time, the best available synthesized tones that can incorporate the background music for silent games and the transition of games with included dialogue. The music of 80s and 90s games carries such a distinct sound that later matured into the modern scores we have today, in which most composers can afford a live orchestra. Metal Gear Solid's soundtrack tracks the spiritual nature of the game and intensifies it in its music. The structure of the score highlights the quality of environmental motifs and how that characteristic enhances a player's experience. It bears this disposition throughout the series, and it accentuates the unnatural angles of the action-adventure genre. I want to thank you for watching this episode of Score UnCovered. The game's score is one of the few reasons I got into soundtracks in the first place. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed the episode, and I'm looking forward to discussing more on it with you. Ending the episode here, once more, thank you greatly.